What's the most awkward thing you've ever had to explain to your significant other? Story 1. I just remembered an incident that happened well in my past, pre-cell phone days, with an ex-girlfriend. Thanks, Internet. She used my car to drop me off at the airport so I could go visit a buddy from high school. We lived, not together, about an hour from the airport. For my trip, I had to change planes. During my layover, I got paged by the airport intercom. Confused, I walked to a courtesy phone and dialed the given number. She was on the line, freaking out and crying. When I calmed her down enough to be coherent, she told me why. It turns out, after dropping me off, she drove back to my apartment and let herself in with my key. She then proceeded to go through all my stuff. She freaked out when she found old condoms in the back of an old dresser, different brand than we'd ever used. She therefore assumed I was cheating. So here I am on a house phone in the middle of the Seattle airport, listening to a hysterical girl and trying to explain the condoms are really old, but also trying to figure out why the heck she's in my house. Breaking up with her on the spot was out of the question, as she was in my house and had my car. That relationship ended shortly after I got back home, and I changed the locks. Good call on the lock change. Story 2. We had a few friends over for drinks in my bedroom to keep the noise down. One of them looked in my bedside drawer, at my instruction, for a cigarette lighter. She laughed and pulled out a box of condoms. Over the next hour or so, we blew half of them up, I got them for free, and a few had spit or hand cream put in them, and were tied and left in various places. Someone else got out my corn magazines and left one between the pages. Another got left down the side of the bed, and someone put one on a carrot and left it on my bedside cabinet. Eventually I got them all to leave, and being drunk, went to bed without cleaning up. The girlfriend came over and was let in by the girl downstairs. She walked in, and you can imagine the thoughts that went through her head. Corn mags, condoms everywhere, used and blown up, popped, one over a carrot next to my bed, and I passed out hungover in bed, naked. Story 3. I used to be a bit naive back in high school, and a certain unscrupulous young man decided to take advantage of this and tell me that blue balls was a life-threatening condition. Fast forward a year, I'm dating a guy from a long distance. He's in public one night, and so I decide to play around and tease him via text while he can't do anything about it. Obviously, blue balls gets mentioned at some point. He, not realizing that I was serious when I said he could die from it, plays along, saying it'd be a good way to go. I could have his books when he dies, etc. He then at some point goes to bed, and thus stops responding to texts. I immediately concluded that he must have passed away. I spent that entire night convinced I'd killed my boyfriend, until he texted me in the morning. He got a great laugh out of explaining to me that you can't actually die of blue balls, despite what most men would like me to believe. Story 4. So, I really like to mess with telemarketers. I either drop some strange foreign accent, pretend I'm crazy, beating someone or something, or occasionally I pretend I'm mentally challenged. Hilarity on my part ensues. The eve of my extreme embarrassment, my partner was busy with school, so no nookie, therefore I was in another room, taking care of business. So there I was, treating my body like an amusement park, when then called the telemarketer. I decided to go the old mentally challenged route, and was doing my best voice, while at the same time doing a slow fap, so as not to lose momentum. This was the moment my SO came in, the room echoing with my best slath voice, phone cradled on my shoulder while I was idly stroking the Cyclops. The look of horror that crossed my significant other's face is well etched in my memory. I would love to hear how you explain that. Story 5. Not me per se, but my wife and I were virgins when we met. I had read and studied about intercourse, so I naturally assumed that it was over when we both had orgasms. Quickly I realized it was logical to make sure she came first. Then I came last, so I wouldn't fall asleep and leave her frustrated. I guess, thankfully, she's never had trouble having an origami, so I never felt frustrated for myself in our 23 years of marriage. Because of this, she assumed this was normal. Until we got older and she spoke to other women, who seemed amazed she thinks this is normal. Some think she's arrogant or lying. You are a freaking god, As soon as we're able to make clones, let's get you first. Story 6. I faked almost 2 years of origamis. I was extremely young and had never even touched myself before, so I didn't know what an origami was supposed to feel like. I just assumed that when it felt really good, it was an origami, so I would tell him that I had come multiple times. I was also his first, so he wasn't sure what a non-cornstar origami looked like and took my word for it. The one time I did have an origami, 6 months into our relationship, I felt horribly guilty. Although I could bring myself to origami with my fingers after that, he never could get me off, so I just kept faking it so he wouldn't feel bad. It was a horrible idea, and I couldn't bring myself to tell him until a drunken fight, which resulted in our breakup. Story 7. I bought a t-shirt for my good friend's birthday at a novelty store. It was green with a rust-colored trombone, and underneath it, it said, Rusty Trombone. My wife comes back from some frou-frou girly store just as I'm about to pay for it at the register, holds it up and goes, I don't get it, what does that even mean? There are a few others in line, so I tell her that I'll explain it in the car, which, of course, made her want to know right away. I got the death stare from the father of a teenage girl as I whispered it into my wife's ear, and her eyes got real big. I could see the look on the dad's face. It silently said, if I end up having to explain that to my teenage daughter now, I'm going to red rum you. Story 8. My friend's girlfriend lives at a house with a name rather than a number. Inglenook Place, I believe it is. Anyway, whenever my friend had been there, her parents' bedroom door had always been open, at the angle where he couldn't see the door itself at all. A few days ago, he went over and it was closed. He was pretty shocked and asked his girlfriend about why her parents had a sign reading Nookie Corner on the door. Of course, she pointed out the name of the house itself and very innocently asked why. I think he actually explained the definition of nookie to her with the use of Urban Dictionary. Story 9. I used to have 2 male roommates, one of which used to sleepwalk. One night, when my boyfriend was sleeping over, the roommate walked half naked into my room, asking if he could get under the covers with me. I had to encourage him out of my room and back to bed without waking him up, then comfort and convince my boyfriend that my roommate had never slept in my bed before. We had recently gotten back together, and he was suspicious of my relationship with my roommates, so this incident didn't help. You can actually wake up people who sleepwalk. Yeah, I'm a bit suspicious of this roommate. I wouldn't be surprised if he was playing the long con and had been pretending to sleepwalk for a long time to build up the expectation that it was normal for him, just so that he could use it to his advantage and actually pretend like he was accidentally sleepwalking into Opie's room. I know it seems far-fetched, but I think we all know how far some guys are willing to go just for the possibility of hooking up. Story 10. There's a lot, but I once had to finally tell my husband that his breath smelled awful. It was a daily thing, and he doesn't smoke or anything, and he brushes twice a day as recommended. It was so hard for me. I said, honey, I'm saying this because I love you, and there may be a problem. This isn't normal. You didn't always have halitosis. Turns out he had an abscess and was also diagnosed with oral cancer at age 25. I'm glad I got the nerve to just say it. Wow, that's amazing. You saved his life. Good for you. Story 11. My hemorrhoids and the following day's procedure for such. Me. Yeah, well, they're basically just enlarged blood vessels that protrude out your anal canal and can bleed and be painful. Her. Oh, okay. Well, that doesn't sound bad. Google it. Her, after Googling it. Oh my God, what the frick? That looks terrible. Story 12. I had to explain a hickey. It was located kind of on my arm, and I even had to think of where it came from when she pointed it out. Then suddenly I remembered I gave myself my own hickey, randomly sucking on my arm. Then I went to put my mouth on it, and it lined up exactly where my mouth hit my arm. Silly. I had to explain booby fricking to a woman in her mid-20s. It ended up being more awesome than awkward, though, because she was down to try it. Story 13. I was at a party with some friends, sausage fest, and needless to say, we were all plastered. Anyways, my friend Joe thought it would be funny, he had a weird sense of humor, to hold me down and administer a hickey on my neck. Well, my girlfriend at the time had a hard time believing that a burly, bearded muscle man would give hickeys out as a joke. I still don't think she ever believed me. I was the victim, god dang it. Story 14. My girlfriend thought men always had erections. The look on her face after our first time when it went flaccid was hysterical. I had to explain to her how it works. She thought we just stuffed it downward into our pants. She must have thought we were veritable titans, capable of striding the earth with endless patience as our denim prisons continually strive to rob us of our sanity. Story 15. Happened last night. I was watching Totally Spies in my room, and the episode was about a villain who was slowing down people's intelligence to caveman-like. At one point, the cavemen were grunting, and my boyfriend walked into my room and heard it. He turns around and leaves. I get a message on Facebook saying, "Enjoy your bestiality." I had to explain to him and my roommates that I was watching cartoons. Story 16. I had to explain that I usually say I don't mind about a lot of stuff, like where we get to have dinner, or if she wanted me to get up an hour earlier and make her breakfast. Never did, just saying, because she made me a happy person that really didn't mind, and not because I don't care, or am dead inside, or am an inconsiderate jackbutt, or I live to serve. Then she had to explain the story behind those scars on her forearm. Story 17. I went to BU, and at the school pub, there's a Knight's Quest where you, over time, drink all 60-plus beers they have in stock. Once you finish all the beers, there's a big ceremony where you invite all your friends, and your friends pick out a knight's name for you. I had to explain to my new girlfriend at the time, who came to the ceremony, why my knight's name was, "Sir, I'm not a chubby chaser, I'm an acceptor." Story 18. The first time my ex and I did it, she was blown away that it felt good for her. She explained how with the guy before her, he was her first, that she basically didn't feel anything, so she assumed the female was basically just a wet hole for the guy to have at. In reality, he was so small, she felt it, but nothing more than that. Story 19. I had a female friend from years back that I didn't talk to a lot, but had her on my phone. She was married, and the last I had talked to her, they were struggling with fertility problems. So one night, I got this text, which probably went to everyone on her phone, that simply said, "I'm pregnant." And of course, this is one of the times my wife picks up my phone when it buzzes. Story 20. I made the mistake of asking my girlfriend if she felt her period, or if it was like, "Oh, look, I'm bleeding." Apparently, yes, it feels strange. Sometimes you can feel it coming out. Most of the time. And sometimes there's just blood everywhere when you're on the toilet. But I wouldn't call it strange. Story 21. I guess it would be the story of how I used to touch myself and finish in the high heels that belonged to an ex-girlfriend and her housemate, and eventually got myself found out. She just laughed about it, acknowledged my fetish, and gave me a bejesus. Sounds like a cool girl. Story 22. My ex-girlfriend was very anti-anal despite never trying it. I'm personally a very curious type, so once while I was home alone, I tried it with her vibrator. She noticed it wasn't where she left it, and I had to explain. Most awkward conversation I've had to this day. Not how I saw that going. Story 23. With my boyfriend, I had to explain that Santorum sometimes accompanies anal. He was super embarrassed before I explained that. I would be embarrassed too if some evangelical politician was standing behind me when giving anal. I did not know this term, so I looked it up. A frothy mixture of lubricant and fecal matter as an occasional byproduct of anal. Apparently it came about because after Rick Santorum, the politician, made statements about comparing homosexuality to bestiality and opining that mutually consenting adults do not have a constitutional right to privacy with respect to sexual acts, a columnist named Dan Savage gathered input from his readers and held a contest for definitions of the last name Santorum in order to memorialize the scandal. Savage then set up a website which defined the term and helped to promote it. Well done. Story 24. I had to explain to my ex that the tampon sizes, colors women use do not vary depending on the size of their vaginas. This is what might have crossed his mind before I explained. Wow, that girl is buying the orange ones? She must have a huge vag. Duh. Story 25. That I want to be used and abused during whoopee. I know it's pretty common, but god dang, if it isn't weird trying to tell your boyfriend, I'm your dirty horse. I laughed my butt off imagining his face the first time. Story 26. That pleasant anal requires some preparation and foresight, and that those professionals in the movies undergo the same preparations. It's just edited out. I hope more guys see this. Story 27. While I was living in China, I met my first Chinese girlfriend. She was ready to explore one evening, and after taking off my pants, she was very confused. Apparently, sex ed is a bit behind in the PRC, and she had no idea that men have testicles. She was mesmerized. Story 28. I had to explain to my wife that Friday and Saturday nights with the guys weren't actually spent at bars and strip clubs and doing random man stuff. Instead, we play Magic the Gathering in tournaments and leagues. Story 29. I had to describe what Lemon Party was without inciting her curiosity enough for her to check that what I was saying was true. I was successful, and she still hasn't seen the Lemon Party, but knows what it is. Story 30. Me. Do you know where a clematis is? Him. Yes, of course. Well, honey, it's about 1.5 inches higher of where you think it is. Story 31. I have had to explain chronic hemorrhoids to multiple girlfriends over the course of 5 years because, well, they can kill a mood. I really should get the surgery recommended. Story 32. Explaining a corn folder after forgetting you had placed such a folder in an obscure space on your computer while she's on my lap. Times were tough, babe. Story 33. Apparently the foreskin is able to slip over the head of the wiener. I'm 28. I'd previously thought my dong was breaking and turning inside out. Story 34. My girlfriend thought that guys checked out each other's dongs in the locker room or at the urinal. As far as I know, we do not. Story 35. Corn. She's pretty naive, and so it was really hard and awkward. Worst part was, do you still watch it now that we're together? Gah. Story 36. I had to explain to my girlfriend recently that curiosity on Mars won't get lonely and lose its mind. She's 26 in 2 months. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.